From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende. Riding shotgun next to me, as he always does, is Andre Johnson Jr. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification from when we drop that fire content. It's podcast number 3 of this week. It's been a busy week. But today, on this Thursday, it was a good opportunity for us, Andre, to maybe pause, regroup, because we had a lot of news earlier in the week with the Saints' premier free agent signing, and just take a look at the class that they have compiled of free agents, and let's just break it down. Let's just break down the class, the impact we think they're going to have, and as a whole, does this make the Saints a better team in 2024?
Right. 7 major signings so far. Obviously, they've re-signed some guys, but the guys they've brought in, Chase Young, Willie Gay Jr., Cedric Wilson Jr., Olisa Mika Udo, Stanley Morgan Jr., Nathan Peterman, and Xander Horvath. We're going to get through all of those guys in the next few minutes, but let's start with the big one, the one that we call it the big splash. You might call it maybe a ripple now that we know the injury situation with Chase Young, but we're going to start with him. What impact do you see him having as kind of the headliner of this free agent class?
You just said it. I got it written right here in the headliner of the class. Big impact, major impact. That's what they want. Yeah. They want the major impact. It's great that they got creative with the contract, and it's great that they were able to kind of cover themselves. But I don't want to be sitting here at this point next year saying, well, at least the Saints cover themselves with a good contract. I want to be sitting here saying the Saints got a freaking steal. Yep. The Saints got a freaking steal. They took the risk and were rewarded. And because Chase Young was a wrecking ball, a wrecking crew, a beast on the football field at a premier position, he not only produced, his production helped them win games and got them back into the playoffs. That's the kind of impact you want to have from a headliner of a free agent class, in particular one at the defensive end position, at the edge pass rusher position. So for all the talk of neck surgery, it's risky. Contract initially fully guaranteed to now pay as you go, which is smart on the Saints' moves. They want this to work, and the vision is come be a beast for this Saints defense in 2024 and help us win football games. I just don't want to be sitting here at this point next year and be like, I don't know, not much of an impact from Chase Young. I mean, they want a major impact from Chase Young. Let's just hope he's healthy enough to do so. But the Saints would not have staggered that contract the way they had if there was they had to have at least some hesitation or fear where he's at from his health situation, but they want to overcome all of that and let him be a beast on the field.
Absolutely. And as I was ranking this class, I had to put Chase Young at the top because he has the highest ceiling of any of the 7 guys that I named previously. Now, there's a lot of ifs that come with Chase Young. If he's healthy, if he's back by, the preseason, the regular season. But at the end of the day, Chase Young is the only one of the 7 guys that the Saints brought in that you could consider a game changer.
Oh, yeah.
Chase Young was a guy coming out of Ohio State who was seen as a generational pass rusher. And a lot of people will tell you the most important part of the defense is the pass rush, the ability to make the quarterback uncomfortable. The Saints didn't do that very well last year. 28th in sacks, one of the worst pass rushing teams in the league. They couldn't keep their pass rushing lanes. Dennis Allen talked about it a lot, and that's what helped some of these mobile quarterbacks that torched the Saints last year kind of get out of there and make plays with their feet. So bringing in Chase Young, like I said, there's a lot of ifs that come along with them, a lot of question marks that come along with them. But at the end of the day, your number one need was a pass rusher. You brought in a 24-year-old pass rusher with a lot of talent, coming off a team that just went to a Super Bowl. He had 7.5 sacks that season. That's not bad at all. And you brought him in for essentially, we broke it down in yesterday's podcast, but $5 million with incentives that can take it up to $13 million.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And I think it's all fair. It's all fair game. And if it doesn't work out, there's going to be disappointment because it's they want this to work out. You just hope it's not. You just hope if it doesn't, I guess, you at least want to see him on the field. You just hope it's not a health thing where you never see him. You're doing the Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner thing with another defensive end or another edge pass rusher. So that's the hope. That's the want. That's the vision for Chase Young. You're the headliner of this class. They're making no mistake about it. They want him to be the headliner of this class, and hopefully he can produce like the headliner in this class.
And moving on to the next guy on the list, if I were to rank these guys, I'd put him number 2. Linebacker Willie Gay, coming from the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. A very underrated signing, in my opinion, Sean. What's your take on Willie Gay?
I think I think this is, had there been no Chase Young, this would be the headliner of the class. I think if I were ranking his impact, if I was sitting here right now, I think what you paid him versus what he can give you, I think it could end up being very good value with Willie Gay. I don't know if he's going to be an official starter. I do know he brings speed, versatility, and athleticism to a linebacker core that has 2 guys that they're pretty etched in their places when you talk about Demario Davis and you talk about Pete Werner. But you bring in a guy that's got some athleticism. There's a lot you can do with that if you have a creative defensive mind. And regardless of what you think of Dennis Allen, he has a very good creative defensive mind that knows how to mix and match personnel for certain situations. And I would love to see this. If Willie Gay can somehow figure out a way to be the guy that, it's the spy on the dual threat quarterback or gets in the rotation, can he rush the passer? Can he be a blitzer? Because to me, if he can give you that, I mean, you hadn't had that like a blitzing linebacker. That was more of a Caden Ellis role when he played a couple of seasons ago back when he was with the Saints. So I think this has a chance to have very good impact. I don't know if he's going to be a guaranteed starter, but I expect him to get legitimate snaps on defense in 2024.
When I think of Willie Gay Jr., there are a handful of names that come to mind. Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, Tyson Bagent, Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield. What do those guys have in common? They all torched the Saints with their legs last season. The Saints struggled with stopping mobile quarterbacks. You're bringing in a guy in Willie Gay Jr. He talked about it in his intro Zoom press conference, how in Kansas City they had a specific package that revolved all around him kind of being a rover, a quarterback spy, and limiting all the mobile quarterbacks that they faced in Kansas City. So you're bringing in a guy with the skill set that could potentially help you in one of your greatest areas of need on that defense. So I like Willie Gay just off that alone. And like you mentioned, we're not sure what his play time is going to be because obviously Demario's not going anywhere right now. Pete Werner is a pretty solid and consistent piece in that linebacker room. But Willie Gay, I see him more as kind of the coverage guy that the Saints were never really able to make Zach Bond into. Yeah. Because they tried to make Zach Bond a cover guy, and he was really more of a pass rusher, and you saw it a little bit in the tail end of his stint here in New Orleans, and that's part of the reason he went to Philly. I imagine he'll get a lot more pass rushing opportunities there. Willie Gay Jr., he's a coverage guy. He's a guy who can help you covering the pass. He's a guy who can help you contain those mobile quarterbacks that have given so many Saints fans headaches over the years. So, like I said, I think it's a really underrated move because Willie Gay Jr. may not set off the alarms or the fireworks in the grand scheme of things and, the national media. But when you talk about bringing a guy in for the low, only 1 year, $5 million, and when you talk about a guy who fits your need and what you look for in a linebacker, that's Willie Gay Jr.
He gives you options.
Yes.
No, his presence allows you to explore different things in different situations because everything about football is situational. And maybe he's not the right matchup against a certain quarterback, but he is a better matchup against another quarterback. Thus, he gets more snaps in that game versus that style of quarterback versus another style of quarterback. And that just having a guy like that gives you the option. I am certain that's what DA is looking at there. He's not just thinking, I need some depth at linebacker. He's thinking, no, this guy can be a little bit of a chess piece here that I can mix and match and move around, and I can, he can be a guy that can help me disguise certain things and be a guy that I can blend in, take him out, wherever the case may be, based off certain matchups. So I'm with you. I like the addition of Willie Gay Jr.
Now moving on to the next guy, the only one of the 7 people I named earlier who got a 2-year contract. Everybody else is on 1-year deals. But Cedric Wilson, he signed with the Saints for 2 years. The wide receiver out of Miami, played in Dallas previous to that. In 2021, with the Cowboys, 16 games, 45 receptions, 602 yards, 6 touchdowns. What's your take on Cedric Wilson Jr.?
You said underrated for Willie Gay. I said this is underrated. I wrote in big letters, underrated. I think we've overlooked this signing, even locally. I think we've overlooked this signing. It happened late in the night. I think it was last Thursday. It happened later in the evening. And it was one of those where no one was expecting. I was expecting a wide receiver. I don't think Cedric Wilson was on many teams or on many, like, kind of radars, if you will, in terms of who the Saints could target at wide receiver. We went through a bunch, and he didn't pop up on either one of our lists. But I think this is the one that's going to sneak up on you with he's playing a position. He's got a very unique skill set within that position. He's a bigger guy that can work between the seams, work between the numbers. He can make contested catches. He's a guy that can work the middle of the field, and I'm not 100% sure they truly have that style of receiver on this roster until they signed Cedric Wilson. Technically, he's the fourth receiver, but it's Olave, Shaheed, and A.T. Perry. I think Wilson's going to get on the field a lot.
Yep.
I think he's going to get on the field a lot. And if he gets a rapport with Derek Carr and can really be that style of receiver, I think we may look back and say this might be the steal of the class because no one really talked about it. I mean, we talked about it, but no one really gave it the true attention it probably deserves, myself included. It was one of those that maybe got glossed over a little bit, at least in terms of the free agent class, considering he's one of the 7. But I think Cedric Wilson could be an underrated pickup that could provide very good value for the Saints for what they paid for him.
Absolutely. And when I look at that Dallas room that he was in, I think about CeeDee Lamb was in there, former Saint Brandon Cooks was in there, Michael Gallup was in there, and Cedric Wilson was still able to come in, and he was pretty much the number 3, number 4 guy throughout his time in Dallas, and he was able to have that 600-yard, 6-touchdown season. You mentioned really the only 3 guys at the start of free agency who were in the Saints receiver room: Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry. We know Olave is going to be the number 1. Rashid has earned the right so far to be that number 2 guy. We'll see how Kubiak uses him. But A.T. Perry, he had a good preseason. He had a good end of the season. He really, as he started to get more snaps, he showed out. Cedric Wilson can kind of come in there and take maybe that number 3 receiver role, number 4 receiver role, and getting 600 yards and 6 touchdowns out of your number 3 receiver. You'll take that.
Especially if it's a make the tough catch type, run a slant with somebody on you and you still kind of make the catch, or run a kind of a square in where, it's 3rd and 8, you run that 10-yard in, he's able to kind of catch it in traffic, kind of body up the catch and absorb the blow. That not Olave can't do that, and obviously Shaheed can't do that. Maybe A.T. Perry can eventually do that, but maybe he isn't there yet. To give yourself that option, to me, again, I call myself out on this. I don't think I gave this enough attention. This is a good signing for the Saints, the Cedric Wilson signing.
It definitely is. The skill set, like you said, Olave, small. I don't want to call him small because he is like 6'1", 6'2", but he's a faster guy. Rashid Shaheed, quicker guy. This is that big guy that you want to bring in. Obviously Michael Thomas leaves. I'm not saying Cedric Wilson's going to come in and be Michael Thomas, but when you talk about guys with that build and that skill set, that could be Cedric Wilson Jr. Now, moving on to the next guy. I believe this was the first official signing the Saints made in free agency, and a lot of people probably heard him and was like, who?
Right.
Xander Horvath, fullback. When the Saints made that their official first move of free agency, what was kind of your take on that one?
Sneaky. I am way too pumped, and I am way too intrigued about this fullback battle. I mean, it's a position we've glossed over for so many years. Now it has life, and this is the guy they made their first, signing of the free agent class was Xander Horvath, a guy many people had never heard of. And what Clint Kubiak's going to do with the utilization of the fullback position and how they use that position to dictate matchups and dictate certain assignments. And there's a skill set that they like out of that position. If they pick this guy, clearly they see something in this guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield, be a blocker, be a runner, line up on the line of scrimmage, whatever the case may be. I am way too excited about the fullback battle because it's going to be one of the first things I watch because it hasn't really been much. It's always been kind of one of those, they signed this guy. It hasn't been one of those positions that you really looked at with any sort of excitement or interest. Now I'm thoroughly intrigued because of the new offense, because this is the guy they picked. Sneaky. This Xander Horvath, Adam Prentice battle, maybe something that we watch. And I know we shouldn't get excited over a fullback battle, but I admit I am excited over this fullback competition.
I am also curious because the fullback position in the NFL has become very antiquated. For about 29 to 30 teams, they don't even think about their fullback. But one of the teams that did last season were the San Francisco 49ers with Clint Kubiak kind of in charge of that passing game. In the Super Bowl, 2 of the biggest plays were made by Kyle Juszczyk in the passing game. So you're bringing in Clint Kubiak from San Francisco. He is one of the handful of guys who is actually going to use the fullback position, and that being the Saints' very first signing of free agency. I'd like to think that means something, because about a month ago, we sat in here and we were looking at the free agents, that the guys on the roster who the Saints could potentially lose, talking about, maybe who would be the guys they bring back. And one of the guys we named was Adam Prentice, because we were curious to see how Clint Kubiak would use Adam Prentice. Would maybe Taysom get a chance to mix into that fullback situation? Would Prentice have the skill set that Kubiak was looking for? So it was interesting to me that not only do they bring in Xander, who did play running back in college, so he's got that background. You've also got Adam Prentice, who you re-sign, and I find it hard to believe that a Taysom Hill maybe won't get involved in that some way too. So
he's too versatile or not.
Exactly. So I'm more interested to see what's going to go on with that fullback position, because we really haven't seen a lot of heavy fullback play in New Orleans, at least since I've been watching since I was little. So it'll be interesting to maybe see something new, a breath of fresh air. Saints fans have been clamoring for creativity, and rightfully so. Maybe, just maybe, Xander Horvath is part of that.
Yeah, again, it's a unique position that we didn't think we'd really have a whole lot of interest in before the Clint Kubiak hire, and now I am thoroughly interested to see what they do at fullback. Who do we have next?
Next up, we've got Olisamika Udoh, the offensive lineman. He played in Minnesota while Clint Kubiak was the offensive coordinator over there, so he's got a little bit of familiarity with Clint. What was your take when they brought him in? Because that was one that also kind of went under the radar.
Yeah, it did. I believe they signed him in the midst of all the Chase Young, like the report of him signing, then the follow report, then the other report, the health and the contract. I think that kind of got blended in. The Udoh signing depth along the offensive line, something that every team needs, every team wants. He's got like 18 career starts over 4 seasons. He's got experience with Clint Kubiak. Certainly, you know that. Brings some versatility, which you have to have when you are a reserve backup lineman. I'd be very curious to see if they view him as a starter. I don't know. I'm sure, look, with a new offensive line coach and a new offensive coordinator, everybody's going to be given a clean slate. So he's the guy that adds to the room. I know his season ended early with an injury last year, so hopefully he's got a clean bill of health. But I think these are the types of signings that you get this stage of free agency. Usually, it's you can never have enough quality offensive linemen, because that's the area where the injuries seem to happen more than any other in the NFL, is up front along the offensive line. A lot of big bodies moving around in a tight space. So I don't mind the signing. Didn't really move the needle for me, but I trust Kubiak understands his guy, and the offensive line coach understands what they want out of that position.
A few minutes ago, we talked about the Saints' needs, and we talked about with Chase Young, them addressing a need as a pass rusher, with Willie Gay, them addressing a need as someone who can kind of stop, those mobile quarterbacks. I think Olisamika Udoh, in a way, addresses a need. That offensive line has also been an issue for the Saints when it comes to protecting Derek Carr. And Udoh played left tackle. He's played right tackle. He's played right guard. So bringing a guy in with that kind of versatility, we've seen the Saints move guys around that offensive line. Andres Pete moved around. James Hurst kind of moved around the offensive line. So a guy who's familiar with Kubiak, who's familiar with the type of system that he would like to run, and a guy who has that versatility to where you can move him on the outside, maybe protecting the blind side. You can have him on the inside in that guard position. I think that versatility is a plus. When I was ranking these guys on, maybe who might be the most impactful, he was 4th after Chase Young, Willie Gay, and Cedric Wilson, just because I think that versatility, especially, I don't think he'll be a day one starter, but you mentioned how often offensive linemen can get hurt, and having a guy who can realistically play 4 out of the 5 positions on that O-line is a plus when you start talking about depth on that roster.
Yeah. And like I said before, you can never have too many quality offensive linemen. And, if he's a guy that offers that versatility and he's a guy that you can kind of depend on week in and week out, well worth whatever they paid. It was only a 1-year deal, so well worth whatever they paid to bring him in. So not a bad signing, and we'll see what he materializes into or what he ends up developing into here with the Saints.
And up next, we have maybe the surprise pick of the offseason. This one wasn't just out of right field. Mm-hmm. This one was out the bleachers. Yeah. Nobody really saw this one coming. Saints bringing in quarterback Nathan Peterman, a guy with 4 career touchdowns, 13 career interceptions, the architect of maybe one of the worst starts we've ever seen in Buffalo when he had that 5-interception first half. But he is familiar with Derek Carr. They played together with the Raiders. He's a guy we talked about who could really give Jake Haener a battle for that quarterback 2 position. When you heard they were bringing in Nathan Peterman, what was your take there? And how do you think he can really make his mark with the Saints as we head into the draft, offseason, training camp, all of that?
I hope I'm not being disrespectful or sound disrespectful when I say this, because it's not necessarily Nathan Peterman, but when I heard the signing, the first thing I thought of was Jake Haener. The first thing I thought of was, okay, they want Jake Haener to win this battle. Because to me, Peterman is a guy that if you bring in, it's realistic that Jake Haener can win that battle and be the QB2, which is what you draft a 4th-round pick to eventually become. But he's got to win it through a competition. But this is a competition he can certainly win. Now, Nathan, I don't want to just completely write him off and just mock him like everybody does about the start to his career, the first 5-interception game. Look, he clearly lived that down, and he's been a backup ever since, or a third stringer ever since. And clearly he's a guy that the Saints quarterback coach has some familiarity with, and they understood. So I don't want to just completely say, oh, Jake Haener's a backup now. But in my opinion, it would be somewhat disappointing if Jake Haener cannot win the number 2 quarterback battle. But look, Nathan Peterman, if he's been able to stick this long in the NFL as a 2nd-string / 3rd-string quarterback, he's bringing value that you may or may not see on the field, because there's or even as the backup, because a lot of times I remember asking Sean Payton about this years ago when they kept bringing back Luke McCown, and I said, what's it about Luke McCown in the room that steps out that really helps? He said, he's a sounding board for Drew. Drew trusts his eyes. It's probably a quality that's understated in the NFL. Maybe that's what you see here in Nathan Peterman. He's played a lot of football. He's probably a smart guy, but all in all, when the signing came down, I was like, okay, well, this is Jake Haener's job, quarterback 2. That's what I thought.
And it's interesting what you said about Luke McCown being a sounding board for Drew, because I think in listening to Nathan Peterman's Zoom press conference, you can tell him and Derek Carr have a very good relationship because they played together with the Raiders. And I think it's kind of interesting to see the impact that Carr has had on this quarterback room in such a short amount of time in New Orleans, because remember, Jake Haener, he went to Fresno State. That's Derek Carr's alma mater.
Absolutely.
So Derek Carr, I'm sure, if the Saints were going to draft a quarterback, I'd find it hard to believe that Carr didn't have at least a little bit of input on the one that they drafted.
Yeah.
Bringing in a former Derek Carr teammate from the Raiders, I'd find it hard to believe that Derek Carr didn't know of that and maybe even get a little bit of input on that. Maybe we'll get to find out for sure once training camp comes around and we can talk to these guys. But I think Peterman as kind of a support system, a sounding board, like you said, for Carr is interesting, and a veteran quarterback for Jake Haener, because they're not just going to give Jake Haener the job. Exactly. You got to go out and take it. You got to go out on that field and prove that you can be the guy if something happens to Carr, to step up and play well enough for the Saints to win football games in the NFL. And that starts with you beating out Nathan Peterman in California when they go to training camp for that QB2 spot.
It's like this. If my quarterback can't go for 4, 5, or 6 games, who's the guy I can trust most to get me 2 or 3 wins? That's the question you got to ask yourself when it comes to backup quarterback in the NFL. And if Haener can't, if the answer to that is not Haener, then they'll go with Peterman. If the answer to that is Haener, then obviously they'll go with Haener. So that was one of those, we just weren't expecting it, because we had kind of went through the names of veteran quarterbacks available, and just Peterman was just nowhere near our radar.
Yep. And as we get to the last guy that the Saints signed, the hometown kid, wide receiver Stanley Morgan Jr. He went to St. Aug High School, went to Nebraska after that, got drafted to Cincinnati. He spent some time with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Now, he played a lot of special teams up there, but he did say in his intro press conference that I went to a few days ago that he is excited to get an opportunity to start lining up out wide again. You know, that special teams is important. He wants to do that here, but he's a receiver. He wants to catch passes.
Pulling for him. He's a hometown kid, went to St. Aug, had a decent career at Nebraska, caught on with Cincinnati, did mostly special teams, as you mentioned. We'll see. I mean, look, they brought him here. Wide receiver is one of those positions. If you kind of shine at practice and training camp, you can stand out because everybody follows the ball. Everybody follows the ball. So he'll have an opportunity to get on the field at receiver and make some plays. But I will give him the reality check of you can get bonus wide receiver reps if you are still the solid player you've been on special teams, because that's going to be his ticket onto the roster is through the special teams route.
Yes, and I think back to what one of the more popular media personalities out there today, Shannon Sharp, Hall of Famer, when he talks about the early parts of his career, he didn't just walk in and start catching passes from John Elway.
Yeah.
He started on special teams. Showing out on special teams got him an opportunity to then be the pass catcher and the legendary tight end that we know he turned out to be. Now, the interesting thing about Stanley Morgan, he showed out at St. Aug. He went to Nebraska, and he wasn't just an average guy over there. Yeah. He was one of the best receivers they've ever seen. When he left Nebraska, he had the all-time records in receptions, receiving yards, and he was second in receiving touchdowns. So this is a guy who does have the experience at the lower levels of football of playing high-level receiver. It just wasn't his role in Cincinnati. But keep in mind, who's in that receiver room? That's Jamar Chase over there. That's T. Higgins over there. Jamar Chase, a first-rounder. T. Higgins, a second-rounder. Yeah. Tyler Boyd, a guy who was a wide receiver one in this league for several years. And they also had some other guys in that room. So that was a stacked receiver room. It's hard for anybody to earn time over there. So coming over here to the Saints, we talked about Cedric Wilson earlier, and I'm interested to see if Stanley Morgan can prove that he can also bring a skill set that maybe this room doesn't have.
Pulling for the kid. I am pulling for him. I always want to see local guys do well. You know, you got Tyron. He's a St. Aug guy. You got Foster Murrow, who's a Jesuit guy. You had Will Clapp here for years, was a Brother Martin guy. So another Catholic League guy in here. I am not mad at it. So there you have it, folks. We went through the Saints free agent class. Each player kind of individually. I think sometimes we were – like I said, with a few of them, we felt like we kind of glossed over. But tonight, we felt like we were able to really break down this free agent class. I mean, all in all, I think you're going to get you need one headliner. And if you get a couple of other good guys that give you decent production, I think you would have gotten what you needed out of this class because you didn't invest a whole lot. All things being considered, 6 one-year deals and 1 2-year deal. I think all in all, you didn't invest a whole lot. Anything else for us tonight?
You know, that's pretty much it. I'm just excited. Next week, you'll be going to NFL owners meetings. So we're
Orlando.
Going to have a lot of new information next week. You're going to get to talk to Dennis Allen. And for context, the last time we talked to Dennis Allen was the last game of the regular season?
I think you're right, yeah.
So it's been about, 2-3 months since we talked to DA. So a lot has happened in the last 2-3 months. So we'll have a lot of interesting and new stuff for you guys coming up next week.
All right, that'll do it for us. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.